This is the Liberal Europe podcast by ELF, bringing liberal ideas into the political debate. This week with Ricardo Silvestre.
Hello, hope you're doing very well, and we thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I'm very happy to be joined by Nino Kalandadze. She's the founder and the executive director of the Chavchavadze Center in Tbilisi, the first civil society organization in Georgia that was modeled after European political foundations. Nino served also as a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia and led the EU-Georgia talks in 2008. She also served as an advisor to the President of Georgia from 2012 to 2013. We talk about the importance of civil society in countries where institutions have been captured by anti-democratic, anti-liberal governments. Something that will be crucially important for Georgia, but not only, as we move into a decade of authoritarian leaders and parties taking over democracies. This conversation was recorded before the Georgia elections, so it's even more important to know and follow the work done by people like Nino and others in Georgian society fighting for democracy, European values, and NATO values. And after our main conversation, please stay to hear a little more about Nino and the amazing work she already did for Georgia and what comes up next for her and for her country. This conversation was recorded at the studios of Radio Free Europe in Tbilisi and was done at the margins of the Black Sea Security Conference that was organized by the European Liberal Forum, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for South Caucasus, the Georgia-Europe Political Foundation, and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Also, my thanks to all of our friends in Georgia for helping to make this conversation happen. And now, with no further ado, I bring you Nino Kalandadze. I'm here with Nino Kalandadze. Nino, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
I asked you to come here because to have a wider lens about the importance of Georgia, not only on the region, the importance of Georgia in the future EU family, and also the work that the center where you are the executive director does at the civil society. What are the threats that we're seeing right now? Like I mentioned in introduction, we are of a very interesting conference on the security of the Black Sea region, the importance of South Caucasus and how that connects to the European Union. But let's focus on the moment now. When we record this, we're going to have a very important election. Later on, we will have follow-ups on that. Let's hope that the result of the election is one to promote democracy and liberal values here in Georgia. But let's try to have a wider lens and the importance of Georgia on the region with all the neighbors that we have here around the Black Sea. Please tell our listeners the importance of having these conversations.
Georgia has, obviously, looking at the map, a very strategic location when it comes to geopolitical interactions and interests that coincide. In the region, Georgia is different from several neighboring countries in a sense that it is not necessarily rich in natural resources. So in terms of surviving as a small country, Georgia needs strong allies internationally, and given the fragility, but also, lack of choice of choosing who your neighbor is, the alliances we seek is obviously the United States within the NATO and the European Union, because for Georgia to survive, it needs economic and military stability. So the foreign policy path Georgia has chosen is a very pragmatic one. On the one hand, because it needs European Union for its economic stability and security, in NATO for its military security, because there is no option for Georgia to opt for neutrality, because this would again mean strengthening Russia's influence here on the ground. On the other hand, we believe that our identity very much lies in Europe, and this is where we belong. And when we are saying we want to join the European Union, we don't say we want to become a member of the European Union, but regain our historic identity. And this is what is widely understood within the Georgian population. When you see the polls, the support for European Union and NATO is increasingly high from year to year, and it's not decreasing despite anti-Western disinformation and propaganda that is on a massive scale in Georgia. So both ways define our foreign policy path, which is backed with the geographic location of this country, because it's, on the one hand, the shortest way to connect Asia with Europe and Middle East. It is also the most convenient corridor for Europe to diversify its energy supplies, bypassing Russia. So therefore, Georgia, as a strategic partner, matters to Europe. Its stability and security, but also the stability in the Caucasus region, is very much decisive for the European stability and security. This is an understanding that has become, in the meantime, pretty self-explanatory, but it wasn't always the case, as I said, back in 2008. And when we say, what was the turning point or the Zeitenwende, as title of the conference is, for us, the Zeitenwende was not in 2022, but in 2007, when Putin at the Munich Security Conference made it very clear that for him the Cold War had never ended, and that he was not going to give up on Black Sea. And no matter how eloquently or creatively he tries to frame the occupation of territories of Georgia and Ukraine, and also justify its military presence in the Black Sea region, it's all about securing Russia's access to the sea, because his perception is whoever controls the Black Sea controls the Black Sea region and the countries and their capitals. And this is what matters strategically for him. But unfortunately, this was not always a clear understanding in the Western European countries, I would say, because Eastern Europe is a different story. Who is the enemy and what the tactics were, but it was a challenge, let's say, in Berlin, also in Paris, and in Washington. So it wasn't always clear, and in my sense, as sort of alarming understanding, in my opinion, is that Europe still lacks the strategic vision towards the Black Sea. It does understand that without a secure Black Sea and Caucasus region, there is no security and stability in Europe. This is clear now after the 2022, but it is still in a reactionary mode rather than preventive. Because wherever is happening here in Georgia, particularly in recent 2 years, formal government of Georgia that has now exposed itself as being an openly pro-Russian government by introducing the Foreign Agents Law and pretty much declaring the West as an enemy to Georgia, aims at isolating Georgia and aims at pushing the West out of the region. And this is a Russian game. It's not about Georgia. It's not even about Ukraine. This is Putin's war against the West to consolidate its power in the region. So I feel like, and now Georgia becomes key in this sense, because given the geopolitical circumstances where Azerbaijan's Aliyev has forged now a new strategic alliances with NATO member Turkey, with Turkey having this two countries, one nation approach, with Armenia now seeing Moscow no longer as a reliable partner and looking increasingly westward, maintaining control over Tbilisi is key for Putin, because it means they keep control in the region and they can maintain their control and increase their control in the Black Sea region and in the Black Sea as such. And this is where I feel like understanding of this connection is lacking in Brussels and in Washington. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine has opened up unprecedented opportunities for countries like Ukraine, like Georgia, like Moldova. EU membership has actually become an option for Georgia, something we would never have dreamed of. But now pretty much everything depends on what's going to happen. It's not just about re-electing a government. It's about maintaining our independence and sovereignty. And maintaining independence of sovereignty of Georgia means more Western presence in Georgia and in the region, and vice versa. Keeping Putin's control here and his proxy regime here in place means Western presence in the region may be delayed indefinitely.
But tell me then, what needs to change? So you're just mentioning a minute ago that people are paying attention. They're not paying as much as attention and not giving the means as much as they are necessary. So what else can be done? Let's say that the worst case scenario happens here and there's a re-election of the actual government, as you said, pro-Putin and anti-West. What can we do?
First of all, learn from mistakes. Start listening to...
sometimes it's the worst, it's the difficult thing to do.
It is. But start being not just reactive, but preventive. Do not get trapped, not having a backup plan. Because all we hear now from Western partners and allies is that they are all waiting for the election. Now, realize this is a captured state, allows the government to stay in power without winning the elections. Have an alternative strategy and understand that it may happen because the enemy, and also one of the key recommendations would be understand the enemy, understand the enemy and its tactics, understand that Russia is fighting on multiple fronts, along with Ukraine, in Georgia and Moldova, with its proxy regimes and disinformation and propaganda machines on a massive scale over a very long period of time. But understand also that there are limited options what the Georgian people can do alone. We can go into the streets, we can demand the government to behave in a proper way, keep our European and North Atlantic integration on the agenda, but be aware that this may still not happen despite our willingness and despite our efforts on the Georgian side, because this is a power struggle. And the Russian oligarch controlling the state institutions and pretty much all the means that are necessary to maintain the power, there are limits to what people can do alone.
And one thing it's quite amazing, Nino, and I had that experience as I got into the city. It's the European Union flags. It's the NATO flags. And then small details, but we can't miss it. Gay people, gay couples walking hand in hand, people with completely different backgrounds. It's clear to see, and completely different attitudes in life sharing the same space. So it's quite an experience which is very similar to what we see in the member states of the European Union. You work with a center that we're going to talk in a minute, but most of the work you do also, it's to promote this liberal values, liberal ideas, critical thinking, individual responsibility, education. So a lot of values that come from liberal tradition. If we have that interest of the Georgian people to be Europeans, to be part of a larger community with liberal values and liberal ideas, why are they voting against their own interests? It's just that relentless propaganda that makes that shift. Because actually, Nino, we see that in Hungary. We see the people massively voting against things that are theoretically to their own benefits. So tell us a little bit about what's happening at this level.
Well, first of all, the setting you describe is very much in line with what I've said. We do feel as Europeans, and our identity lies in Europe. Now, having said that, it is a very, traditional conservative country close to Asia, with lots of Asian historic dominance. But still, the European aspiration remains a key aspect for the Georgian population. But the enemy is working differently here in Georgia. And unlike Hungary, we are not part of the European Union yet. So we do not have the luxury of playing this double game, because they are already within Europe with all the benefits European Union can share. So they can afford become more conservative or it's a dangerous play, but it's a dangerous game, but it's still within within the allowed limits. Now, on the other hand, Georgia has still a long way to go. And what my center does, not just educating people, but mainly contributing to transforming their mindset and become truly European to be ready once we join the European Union. So we closely work with the youth, and particularly in the regions where the population is less exposed to the West, perhaps speak less Western languages, and Russian dominance is more present. This is the idea, promoting liberal democratic values so that they can live by themselves these values. But there are challenges to that as well, because not only in Georgia, but it has become a global trend that weaknesses of democracy, weaknesses of on the sides of European and American policymakers allow autocratic regimes to plant doubts. And this is where propaganda comes in. That is extremely active and effective in Georgia, because typical to propaganda means they playing on irrational sentiments. And there was an alarming survey recently outlining Georgia as one of the most susceptible to disinformation countries on the European continent. When I'm referring to the state capture, it also includes lots of leverage on the media and the media coverage, in particular in the region, of Russian narratives being translated into Georgian is very much, an applied method. So yes, back to your question, it is to a larger extent due to disinformation and propaganda that is working effectively. It is because we are not there yet within the European Union, and because it is a predominant trend. We see the election outcomes in Austria. We see
Netherlands.
Exactly. We see next to Hungary now also Slovakia.
Yes.
Moving away. So, but also in the United States, these sentiments are played well out globally, I would say. And Georgia is a small country, still socially not well developed. These are weaknesses to be easily exploited by a well-structured and systematic approach of the enemy. That is Russia.
Talking about this relentless propaganda and the level of it, and this is a short story, but I feel like telling it here on the podcast. I'm walking the streets of Tbilisi and I see this advertising that I don't understand Georgian, naturally, where we have a swimming pool that is fully destroyed, and then we have this very beautiful swimming pool, and then we have this soccer pitch that is completely destroyed, a very cool soft. And I thought, on my ignorance, naturally, that this was either a political propaganda at the limit or something that relates to social intervention, which is, oh, look, here we had a swimming pool and it was destroyed, and then we invested money. And then I found out that, no, actually this is a political message, which is, this is a swimming pool in Ukraine and this is a swimming pool in Georgia. See the difference? That is just monstrous. I mean, it's an insidious way of trying to convey a political message that I feel like an European, and I'm naturally a member of the European Union, really atrocious. In this last minutes with you, Nino, I want to go into the work that you do and your center does, Chavchavadze Center, where you are the executive director. And, for example, And really very cool. This is the first civil society organization in Georgia that is modeled after European political foundations. So please tell us a little bit about the work that it's been done in the center, and how can then people follow the work you do and the center does.
This is a political foundation. As you said, I co-founded in 2018. This is a time when I left the political party I was member of for 17 years in the government and then in the opposition. And then I thought it's time to work on the weaknesses of the political and social landscape that you cannot affect within a political party, but rather do from outside, approaching challenges from bottom up and starting really promoting democracy from bottom up, both on a social and civic level, but also within the political parties. So we do a lot of educational work. It's a think and do tank. So we also do a lot of practical research that not only benefits the scholars but also actual political players, the progress in political parties, with whom we are working closely on improving and implementing democratic rule within the political parties. It is still a challenge, but we get there. And we also, as I said, work closely with the youth. That's our major target group. It's a population in the rural regions. We do a lot of seminars, debate trainings, negotiation, etc. But the idea is to make them ask questions, not
the best way.
Exactly, not just give them, a ready recipe, because we don't have ready recipes, but to make them, start asking questions. And also asking questions is a very effective tool to counter disinformation. And we also do a lot of work together with NATO, for example, on anti-disinformation, countering disinformation by building resilience here on the ground. So that, as we believe, is the best way to prevent future spread of information manipulation, how to detect disinformation, how to listen carefully to the news that is being offered, because for someone like myself who was born in the Soviet Union, we were trained to read between the lines, so to listen between the lines. But for the youth, it's different. What we also do, one of our major projects that I'm very proud of, is civic memory, that aims at giving the youth the context, or the historic and political context they may lack because they are just too young, because the recent history is not being taught in schools or universities, and because lack of this logical connection may lead to a false decisions once they become active citizens or political players. And we see a lot of youth in the streets playing a decisive role in Georgia's transformative future. And what they do need is to know their past and the recent history so that they understand what is happening now, where all these patterns come from, and that the history repeats itself pretty often, so that they can learn from mistakes and move on and make, informed decisions. This is just a part of the work we do. I hope we can continue with that work. We are, at this moment, slightly at risk because the foreign agents law that was introduced by the government directly targets organizations like mine. We obviously refuse to register ourselves as foreign agents because we're not foreign agents. All we do is entire work is dedicated to national interests. So obviously we do work with international partners, but to promote democracy in Georgia and Georgia's democratic development. All organizations that are not registered will become subject to governmental sanctions and fines. This jeopardizes our work technically, but also physically, because we have been frequently attacked. Some of our members of our organization, researchers, have been arrested, have been fined during the demonstrations. One of our founders was arrested for supporting Ukraine. So it is also a physical threat when it comes to implementing our activities, and all activities we are implementing currently. The location is very carefully selected, and we do not do open calls anymore, so that the propagandists, TV channels do not find us easily. So it is becoming a challenge to operate safely here on the ground, and it will become a challenge if this government stays in power, because the aim of this foreign agents law is to silence all critical voices that might be critical of the government.
I'm going to put all the links on the podcast show notes so that our listeners can follow not only the work done in the center, but trying to help if there are ways of doing it. Listen, Nino, this is always illuminating. We live very sheltered, very comfortable lives in some of the countries of the European Union. And to just share this moment with you and see all the wonderful work you already did for this country, you're still doing, and hopefully you will keep doing on the future. It's such a privilege. And let's talk again. Let's meet again on a better circumstance. Absolutely. Where we can talk about the future of Georgia and the European Union family. So thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll be happy to join anytime.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What was the path that you took to the point that we're now talking on the podcast?
I am a lawyer by my initial background. I studied law in Germany, and then graduated from the State University in Georgia, but I switched then at some point later to international relations. For my professional background, I think I've covered all branches of the government. In my past career, I was a member of parliament representing the legal committee, and I believe being very active in terms of implementing very useful reforms at that time, because this was the first post-Rose Revolutionary parliament. So we were doing a lot of work on our own without having without having a real staff, drafting the laws and the amendments, and we were presenting them to the public and to the parliament. And this was a very exciting time, because I felt like, now I'm doing something impactful.
I imagine. That is translation to ideas to politics.
Yeah, exactly. We were very young and very enthusiastic. And to a certain point, we did change a lot in Georgia. And this is where the first steps of implementing the actual foreign policy comes in, because this is the time where Georgia starts calling on its counterparts, its European and American counterparts, that Georgia matters, and that we want to join the EU and NATO, and also receiving lots of criticism, because I remember Javier Solana telling us once that we were not asking, but we were requesting to be expected, and no one does this in a diplomatic way. So but it was a thriving experience, and you also learn a lot. You learn from your mistakes. So also the reforms I mentioned, they were not necessarily popular. It caused a lot of unrest and lots of demonstrations and people going into the street and demanding previous rules. But
But you did mention two things that I really wanted to do a follow-up. And again, we're still talking about your path. So you switched from lawyering to international relations. What was the reason? Anything in particular? Or is this professional convenience?
Both. Firstly, because while being in the parliament, again, I was representing the Georgian delegation to the Council of Europe, and therefore doing a lot of both bilateral but also talks with the international organizations. And at some point, 4 years later, I was appointed as a deputy foreign minister of Georgia, and this was where I thought now it's time to have a little bit more formal background when it comes to international relations. So
always a great idea.
The biggest challenge I faced while switching into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was that I was appointed in May 2008, and in August 2008, the war broke out. Mm-hmm. So this is something where you not just lack the experience, but there is no playbook you can follow. So it's just, being caught by surprise and being improvisative as much as you can and pretend to be brave.
And be brave also.
And be brave. And do a lot of negotiations, because the timing then was very different from what we are seeing now after the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine. Now the geopolitical landscape has changed completely, but also the mindset of our European partners. It is completely different. In 2008, we felt, and today I guess I'm free to say that we felt pretty alone, because we were trying to reach our allies and European and American counterparts to make us, to make them understand that we need no help. and it wasn't even physically possible back then in August, when everyone was either in Beijing or spending some sunny days somewhere in their vacation. So it was a big challenge, and it was even more challenging afterwards when we tried to counter the recognition policy pushed forward by Moscow to recognize the occupied territories in Georgia. And this was, this is where actual diplomacy came in. This is where I learned being diplomatic. This is where I learned advocating for actual things. So this is. And this is a whole different experience of my professional background.
Well, anyway, you serve as an inspiration for everyone that is listening to us and would like to leave a mark like you did on your country, also in the future of your country in the European Union. This is all for now. I'll be back soon with more podcasts. You can always visit the website liberalforum.eu to know more about the activities of the European Liberal Forum. So until the next episode, let's keep making the world a better place.
You were listening to the Liberal Europe podcast by the European Liberal Forum. This podcast was co-financed by the European Parliament.